There it is.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, joined by...
Rachel Jameson. We're
It's been a
actually
while,
together.
Rachel. Yeah,
I
it's been a
know.
while. We was on together when we had Melissa on as a guest, and other than that, we
Yeah.
haven't been on together in quite a while. So
Yeah,
good
we
to
just
see
have been
you.
your schedule is different than mine, and it just hasn't worked. So
We
yeah.
both have been so crazy busy. I got to tell you, I think I've had a cordless drill, a hammer, and a shovel more in my hands lately than I have in many years. I have been so busy just working around here.
I feel that my hands are sore because I've held a paintbrush in my hand for I think weeks now.
Yes, me too. I've even done some painting. It's just been crazy. I am just wore out. All my
Mm-hmm.
joints are sore. I'm like, man, I am too old for this. But you know what? I'm getting some stuff done. It's looking better around here. We've done a lot of infrastructure changing with fencing and just all the things. So I'm excited about some of the changes, and it's kind of a building year, and so
Yes,
next year
it's a
might
building
be
year
more
for
of a
both of us.
planting year. Yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to definitely change the layout of the property, which I've been intending on doing for, since I bought that other property, really doing a major change, and I hadn't got around to it, and we finally did it. So it's not been cheap.
I
And it's
can't
not
wait
been
to see
easy.
it. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I might actually start videoing some property tours because I won't be ashamed of my homestead. No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't ashamed
Oh,
of it
you never
anyway.
should have been. I've seen the videos from before, and your place is gorgeous.
The fence turned out really nice. I did the cross buck ranch fence around the front. I did privacy fence around the back, so it's all privacy fence. But around the whole front has got that cross buck ranch fence, and it came
I
out
love
really,
that
really
look.
nice. Yeah, it looks really good, and
Did
just
you
nice
end up
gate
painting it, or is it just
stained it. Yeah, like a walnut
okay?
stain. Yeah, it looks really good, and yeah, it's just going to be a nice garden entry, coming off the front, and it really turned out nice, and it made some nice definitions. And from a permaculture perspective, it creates a lot of edge, and edge is what it's all
Yeah.
about. And I love it's hard to really think that like a fence creates an edge, but even a ranch fence, because it's not to the ground all the way everywhere,
Yeah.
but it does. It gives you a thing to plant against, and it just gives you this defining border, that really helps you put things and spread things out. And it's just, I love it. I love having a nice edge like that to work
Yeah,
from.
that's one of my favorite things to plant against is just the edges of property
Yeah.
or fences, whatever you have. But
And
I
I
just think
already
it looks
started
so nice.
to. I already put some flowers along there, and I put some rhubarb over there. I've been working that edge already.
There you go. There you go. I love it.
Yeah. How's things been going on your end of things?
Just the same old, same old. We still don't, we were talking about this before, but we still don't have leaves yet here. So for those
Yeah.
listening, it is May 6th, because we probably won't put this out for a couple of days at least.
Maybe tomorrow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and we still don't have leaves out. My forsythia bloomed and blossomed. My daffodils are up in my orchard, but we have buds, but we're not leafed out yet. So I'm starting to see if my plants lived through the move, because we made this big nursery that we put in to move plants to, and it's looking like we have a lot of buds, and it's looking like just about everything made it. All of those elderberries. I was really, really excited about the sea buckthorn last year, and I was worried that those wouldn't transplant well, but those have all got little buds on them. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're about ready to explode in there. It's going to be crazy in there once it all leaves out. So
yeah,
once it leaves out, I'll get some video of it. I tried videoing it to put it into the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group, but it doesn't look like anything because they're just sticks still. So
right.
Yeah, once it does that, and then we got to figure out where to put it all. So yeah,
I'm glad I'm a little bit ahead of you. I just got my tomatoes and peppers in the ground today, so things are definitely going that direction for me. So I'm excited. We're going to have real food growing on here in no time. A lot more of it anyway.
Yeah, we could still get a freeze until the end of the month here. So I typically don't plant until
ours is Mother's Day. It's supposed to be, but looking ahead in the forecast, there's nothing. I mean, I could have planted probably 2 weeks ago, honestly, and there hadn't been any freezing days here.
Yeah. So. I've snuck in stuff before myself in the past. So
yeah, one year I did everything like 2-3
Hmm.
weeks before, and we got some freezing. I'm out there
Oh
covering everything
no.
with blankets, and I mean,
And they're done that.
yeah, and I had some stuff not make it, and yeah, it was bad. I even had snow falling, and I was having to like knock snow off stuff. It was bad.
Oh,
I
I
really
did that
jumped the
one
gun.
year with tomatoes and they never recovered.
Yeah,
Like they
I'm
didn't die,
really,
but they were so stunted.
I'm pretty good about watching the forecast now and really not taking that
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah. So now
Anyway,
I'm looking forward to putting in my guilds because we have the fruit trees and we're just adding stuff around those and
yeah.
making a
Well,
little some food forest. It'll be fun.
well, one thing about having a food forest and having guilds is you'll want to put in some nice garden paths also. And that's what we're going to talk about today on the podcast. Garden paths from a permaculture perspective, because garden paths can be a whole lot more than just going from point A to point B in your garden. You can do a lot with them. And from a permaculture perspective, that's the thing I really like about permaculture is that nothing is as it seems, right? Like a chicken is not just a chicken. It's like
Yes.
20 different things, right? It can do so much for you or any plant. I mean, it's all this function stacking and all the things and everything just can, when you use it correctly, it can do so much more for you than just its, you know, original intended purpose, right? And garden paths are
Right.
really no different. Um, Garden paths can do so much more. They play a big role in just shaping how you move through your garden, how you harvest, how water flows, how you get compost to your garden, how your garden connects with nature. I mean, just everything. It just we're going to talk about all the things that a path can do for your garden, for your homestead. So I kind of like paths. I've always been a big fan of paths in my garden. But make no mistake about it. Function first. The main goal of a path is that you have access to your stuff, right? That is the main goal. So
Yes.
access is
It is.
important. And so you want to definitely make your paths accessible, efficient, um, wide enough.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. I've done that mistake before, not making them wide enough
yes,
for the wheelbarrow. Yep.
yeah. So it's why I like paths. Just the other day, I'm having a conversation with a neighbor, and they're like, "Why do you have all those big rocks around your garden beds?" Because I have an in-ground garden out in the side yard, and I've defined my garden beds, my 4x8. I broke it off in 4x8 sections, and I put these large rocks all the way around all the beds, and then I have the paths between the beds
Hmm.
and down the main center, and they're like, "Why did you do it like that?" And I'm like, "Because I don't want to step on my beds. I don't want the compaction." Just
Right.
today, I'm out there planting tomatoes, and the garden beds, I haven't really done anything to them. I don't till. They're just there, and so I had some dandelions. I had some big dandelion plants growing in the garden bed. I reached down and I grabbed those dandelion plants and I pulled them up, and about 8 inches of root just straight up out of there like nothing. It was so
Nice.
soft because I have paths and I don't walk on my beds. I don't have the compaction. And they were just, that soil is just so soft. I was telling my wife, I said, this is probably the best garden soil I've ever had out here. It is just so good.
Yeah,
It's
that
really
sounds
nice.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, it
you
was
should eat
really,
that
really good.
dandelion.
Yeah, I had a bunch of them actually. I had way more than I needed. I had a bunch out there growing in it, which is good. I mean, it's good for the soil, but yeah, just a really good soil. And part of having this, because you have garden paths, it really helps to protect your garden. And so yeah, that's part of it. You prevent the compaction and protect the plant roots. Um, and zones and sectors have a lot to do with it too, where your paths are and what kind of paths you have depending on
Right.
where they're at on your homestead. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But yeah, just the foot traffic and the wheelbarrow traffic and things like that. Paths are really, really important. So it's just good to have them. And you
Yeah, they
definitely want
are.
them wide enough to get that stuff down through there to set. If you're harvesting, you got baskets or whatever, you want plenty of room to set the baskets and kneel down and harvest and
Yeah.
do those kind of things. So, what do you generally make your paths at? I generally go around 30, 36 inches. I mean, they're pretty wide.
I tried doing small because we don't have a lot of space. So I was trying to make
Yeah.
more garden and I ended up having to widen them. And when I did them the first
Yeah.
time, I did 2 feet and I ended up widening them to 3 feet.
Yeah. I have,
I
I
have
have,
my wheelbarrow has 2 wheels on it
okay. Yeah.
just because I'm not super strong. When you get them super full, they're heavy. And
Yeah.
with the 2 wheels, I needed that extra. And plus, turning the corners
Hmm.
takes a little bit more space. So I ended up going 30 to 36 wide as well.
Yeah, well, the beds I have in the backyard, they are only 2 feet apart, and it is a lot harder. They're like the
Yeah.
main path down the front is wider, it's like 3 feet, but then between the beds is like 2 feet, and yeah, it's a lot harder to get in there and do your work, but so I made sure on these other ones, I made them a little bit wider, a lot more convenient.
Yeah, and
So
my beds aren't raised like yours are, so getting down and kneeling between the two, it's nice to have a little bit of extra space to be able to kneel and, like you
mhm,
said, have your basket and
yeah,
tools with you. Before it was pretty crowded, and as your plants get taller, they kind of start coming into the path a little bit, depending on
mhm,
the height of them, and that
yeah.
crowds things.
Well, and I just think also with building paths, you want to make your paths very obvious too, because you want to just, people will tend to just, you want to make it to where people just tend to go down the paths and not step on things they shouldn't be stepping on. So I like to try to make the paths very obvious. And you can do that by planting stuff along them and just having and having a different material there than you do in the garden beds or whatever. Because a lot
Right.
of people, I think about like I have mulch paths in a lot of my garden. Well, a lot of people use mulch in gardens. If I was going to do that, I would use two different kinds of mulch, so it would look completely different,
Yeah,
and
especially when
keep
you're
people
doing
out
no
of it.
till. Yeah,
Mhm.
and you want to keep that garden soft. You don't want to
Yeah.
be telling people constantly, "Oh, don't walk over there." Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, and, so just people are gonna naturally walk through it. I mean, I have people here that walk through, gardens, and I wanna make sure they know this is a path, that's where you shouldn't be standing over there. So, now, around guilds and stuff, it's a little harder to define because they don't have actual paths around the guilds, so you have a lot of mulch there. So, it's a little more difficult in the guilds than it is the
Right.
garden beds. You might have a path going to a guild, but it's a little harder inside the guild to get to the trees and the fruit and things like that. You might end up stepping on some things. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and
And you
for
get
me
impact.
too, I didn't have irrigation system set up, so I had to use hoses, and having the path, like you were saying, with the rocks on the
Mhm.
corners helps guide the hose, and
Yep,
yep,
absolutely.
yep, and having the path to drag the hose through is kind of nice.
Good point. Um, and also, well, we'll get into that later. Say the design of the paths too, but we'll talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
more as we go. Let's talk about like zone planning and integration. Obviously, you're in permaculture, you have your zones. Your zones 1 and 2 are closer, 3 and 4 a little, 3 through 5 a little, farther away. So zones 1 and 2, your paths need to be more durable, more, wider because you're going to be doing more of your work there, easier to clean or manage or add to. If you have to say you have mulch, you have to add more mulch to it or whatever occasionally. If you're going to spend money on things like stone or pavers, there's the zones you want to do that in. These are the paths that are getting more used more often.
Right.
So yeah, those are the high traffic areas. Zones 3 through 5, where it's a little further away, you're going there less frequently. You could actually do more natural type paths,
Yeah, you can
grass,
get away with
clover.
less. Yeah.
Yeah, you can use even just simple wood chips. Or like I said, mowing is a good way to do those further ones. You're not going to go there that often.
Right.
Just mow them.
Yeah, some people
And that's
just have
fine.
mow paths.
Yep. And that's totally fine. It's really fine too in zones 1 and 2. It's just more maintenance. So, but for the further ones, it's absolutely a good idea, I think, even to do that. Um, so, just and be open to change too, because what I find is like, you know, the zones change. Like d- I
Yeah.
might have stuff further away, but I do find myself going there more often than I thought I would. And so I might have to make some changes later on that to make it better. Also vice versa up front. Like it was so funny because like I have this area right next to my house, um, that you would think would be like my zone 1, but
Right.
it's not, because I go out the back door and the flow of the pathways takes me either into the backyard or off to the side yard to the garden beds instead of turning and going up the side of the house where there's garden beds there too. So it ends up not being a place I walk down through very often, right through there. So it wouldn't
Yeah,
be a
we have
zone.
something really similar at our other house. We
Yeah.
actually would put in the winter, it was our zone 1 because we would put firewood there. But
Yeah.
I never went over there ever.
Yeah.
And it was
I
right along the side of the house, but it was just the side. I never went over there because there was no sunlight. I couldn't really grow anything. So yeah.
I grew a ton of stuff there. And I thought I'd put it there because it'd be easier to access, and I would access it. Well, I ended up happening, I had a lot of herbs and stuff there, and they got neglected, and weeds were just going
Ah,
crazy up there because I hardly ever turned and went up that way, where so I had to kind of restructure and put things in different places because I found out that I need stuff up there. It's low maintenance. It doesn't require a lot of care. That's not going to get a lot of
right.
attention because I don't go even as close as that is. I just don't go there that
Yeah,
often.
and
I
that's
don't make
okay.
that turn. Yeah.
It's cool to change your mind.
So, and I used to have a nice gravel pathway through there, and it was nice. And now I removed all that stone. I actually put it in a different place, and I put mulch there because I didn't really need the more expensive gravel there. I thought I'll just put mulch there. I don't walk up through there as much. So it's actually a mulch pathway now.
That works.
So yeah, you just kind of observe and you revise and change and you do what you got to do to get your zone, your paths for the proper zones there and how it is. So I think it's a good idea when you're paying attention to paths. Obviously material choices, and everybody's got opinions on that too. Material
Yeah.
choices are, like, what do you like your paths to be made out? I've made paths out of everything. I've had gravel, I've had mulch, I've had dirt, I've had grass, I've had clover, I've had all the different. I mean, I've done a bunch of different ones.
Yeah, I think we've done mulch, pavers. Pavers were probably
Mhm.
my least favorite.
Yeah,
Mulch, we've
I
done
like
grass.
pavers that are spread
Yeah,
out and embedded into the grass to where you just mow over it, to where you don't get the wear down to the dirt and the grass, so you can kind of walk on the pavers that are like they're flat with the ground, so you can
mhm,
mow over them, but
yeah,
yet you can step on them and you don't really get that wear in your pathway like you would if
yeah.
you just had grass. I do like them like that. But
Our
yeah,
yards have never been flat, so we really couldn't
mm,
mow over it.
right,
But
yeah.
I think if I could mow over it, it would have worked better. We didn't like it. My favorite so far has been mulch. Other than during leaf blowing season, then it can be a little bit of a
I
pain.
like mulch, but also what you put under that too. Like I put my gravel walkways in, and I actually put landscape fabric under them, and I wish I would have never done that because
That stuff's
what happens
horrible.
is weed seeds get into the gravel and they shoot
Yes.
the root through the landscape fabric, and then it just becomes
Yes,
this matted up mess of roots in the fabric. And
exactly.
I pulled a lot of it up when I've redone some stuff, and it was just a mess. And I have places where I just laid some cardboard down and put the gravel down, and it's fine. It doesn't have near the weed pressure that I get in those parts where the landscape fabric was.
Yeah, that's
Because it's
exactly
not,
what happened to us, and it still gets
yeah,
dirt and stuff down in there, and it will still grow stuff, and then it's
mhm,
really hard to remove, so
yeah. Where if you don't have that,
we've
you can
stopped
just pull it
using
up real
it.
easy. Yep, I have
Yeah,
too.
we've
It's like I
stopped
don't use
using
anything with it.
it.
It's
Yeah.
just cardboard and whatever I'm going to put on top of it's what I do now, and it's fine. And I do the same thing with mulch. I just put the cardboard down, then I'll put the mulch down, and it's fine. But if you're going to do like a living pathway, it's great. Things like clover and creeping thyme, things like that
Yeah, I
are
love those.
great. Yeah, they work great. And white clover is fantastic because it really spreads. It keeps really, really low. You don't even have to mow it that often because it does such a good job. And I have quite a bit of that here. It does really
And it's
nice.
just so pretty. I just love that look. It's just so pretty and green and lush looking.
And it fixes nitrogen, which I love.
Right.
It just adds that
Well,
extra
and
nitrogen.
I mean, your rabbits can eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um, I have a lot of those wild strawberries. I don't know if you have those up there. Those little teeny
I
weensy
do.
looking little
They're
things,
just
and they're
super
really
tiny, and it's like
low.
eating candy
Yeah,
when you
and
get one.
they grow really, really low on the ground. I think they call them mock strawberries or whatever. A lot of people do. And anyway, they're really, really low. They don't, they just don't get very tall. It works really well in pathways, and it just kind of grows
Oh,
wild
I'm
up
gonna
here.
have to try that.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
purslane grows. You
Yeah.
have to mow it, but it spreads out and lays flat for the most part. You will get tall if you let it go, but
Yeah, just
it
like
does
a
good in paths.
living mulch, a
Yeah,
living pathway.
and it works great.
I've
And
seen
what's nice
people,
is,
sorry.
no, I was gonna say what works great with those too is if you have like tractors for like rabbits or chickens or quail or anything, you can run them down
Yeah,
your pathways and actually they can eat that stuff down instead of mowing it even.
right, right. I think some people with the mulch, people will put like spent mushroom spawn and stuff in there and sometimes get mushrooms
Mhm.
growing up in
Yeah,
there.
generally in mulch, you can do that absolutely, and I've done that a
Mhm.
couple times and you get it on the sides, like especially if you have like some raised beds or something, you'll see it like
Yeah.
growing off on the edges, right on the next to the wood of the raised beds a lot of times. But I tell you what that does though, that um, that fungi will actually make the wood break down faster in your
It
raised bed.
does.
You have wooden
It
raised
does.
beds too, so I've noticed that also. So I
Yeah,
try to
because that's
avoid anything
basically what
mushroom.
yeah, that's basically what mushrooms are doing is breaking things down.
Yep.
Yep.
So I try to avoid it. And if I got a wooden raised bed or something, I have learned not to do that. Put that in a
Right.
pathway with raised beds like that. So, but I did that early on years ago, and I did notice it was eating my wood pretty good. So didn't like that. But yeah, wood chips, straw, bark mulch, all that breaks down fairly slow, and it will feed the soil, which is really, really nice.
And
But you
covers
do
the
have
soil, which we've talked about being important.
Yeah, but one bad thing about it is you got to continually add to it, and that's what
Yeah.
the parts where I have the mulch, I have to every year I'm adding more mulch to keep it because it eats
Right.
it and it breaks down, so you're always having to add to it, which is why I kind of went with gravel in a lot of it because gravel it's always there. I mean, I put that in 12 years ago and it's still there, of course. So yeah, I shouldn't have put the landscape fabric under it, so I got a lot of weed problems. I'm always messing with that, but the gravel's there, it ain't going nowhere, so I don't have to add to it. You could do I could compact it better. I use like an 8 stone, which is a little loose. I could probably use like some granite or some crushed stone or something. It would probably pack it a little tighter where weeds may not grow
True.
in it quite as well. So I could add to that later maybe and do something better for that. But then it has, water runoff, things it can do to help you, filter the water and put it into the beds next to it and things like that. It can kind of
Right.
benefit in those ways. And then there's just hardscaping like brick, stone, pavers, like you mentioned earlier.
Oh, I
You know,
love stone.
it's great. It's also can be very expensive to put in.
Yes. Unless you have
Um,
it, which we kind of have
yeah,
naturally here. So
yeah.
not tons of it, but yeah.
We have a lot of round field stones here. Now, when I lived in Tennessee growing up, like you could just walk out in your yard and pick up all the flat stones you wanted, and it was everywhere. Here, I don't have that. It's more like around field stones, field rocks.
Our one part of our property now used to be part of a farm apparently, and there's a huge pile of stone of big rocks that they pulled out.
Mhm.
So we're going to be using those.
Yeah, you can do a lot of repurposing too with like bricks, find bricks used, and
Right.
I've seen people use old pallet wood and make little wooden pathways. I've seen the broken, what they call urbanite, the broken concrete, and put that in pathways and stuff. You can make that look pretty good if you set
It
it
can
up
be
right.
creative, and it
Yeah.
doesn't all have to match. I mean, it can change as you get into different parts of your, like you've already talked about, as you get into different parts of your garden, you can change it up.
Absolutely. So there's just some different things you can do for materials, some ideas, and like I said, I've done about all of them, and they all have their pros and cons. They really do. I do tend to lean towards the mulch. The only downside is I have to just constantly replenish that.
Yeah. I mean, it builds great soil, but it definitely, every
It
year
does.
you have to replenish it every year.
Well, let's get into the more fun stuff now. We've talked about like having paths, the importance of having them, and the materials. Let's talk about why how does permaculture really tie into it? I think we're getting into more of that now. Edge effect. We already talked about edge. We
Yeah,
love
you
edge.
get
I
lots
love
of
the fence.
that.
Love the edge around the fence. Love the edge on my pathways. You can absolutely have edible borders. You can plant all kinds of plants along the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I have comfrey all along a lot of my paths. So I can just chop that comfrey, toss it over into the grow where I'm growing things, and it makes a nice area there. I have taller stuff. I have like elderberry growing along pathways. I have, we're talking off before we started the recording. We were talking about our walking onions, how they just kind of take over.
Oh yeah, I have walking onions.
Everywhere,
I have walking onions bordering all of my trees in my orchard right now because some kinds rodents and stuff don't like the smell of it. But yeah, I love that. We did that, with garlic and stuff too. You can use on the edge.
Yep, absolutely.
Herbs, all that kind of stuff.
All kinds of herbs. Yeah, all kinds of herbs, especially anything more of a bush style. You can just keep in one spot and just kind of walk into your pathways. But you can definitely plant all kinds of herbs along the pathways. I like to do vertical edges. I like to put, like, say, trellises right on the edge of the pathways and grow like beans and peas and climbing flowers and things like that. And then feels like you're walking through a tunnel almost because you got all these trellises on each side of you. And I love doing that. Like, you walk out my back door right now and you have the greenhouse on one side, but then I have 2 trellises right there next to each other right off the bat. And I usually go either cucumbers or green beans up those trellises. So it's like immediately I'm walking right through a
I
tunnel
love
right in
that
my
look
backyard.
too.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
too.
and you
It's
can do arches too over your
yeah,
walkway. I
absolutely.
love
Do that
that.
and have your
I see that done a lot because
yeah.
then you use all of that space, especially in small space gardening like we both have had to
Mhm.
do.
Yep, absolutely. It works really, really good. We talk about nitrogen fixtures in the pathway, but you can also just have nitrogen fixtures along your pathway. You have, legumes, and
Mhm.
like I said, I grow comfrey, which is a dynamic accumulator. So you got things like that. So just fertilizer plants and nitrogen fixers and all kinds of things like that, making it real easy to get to them to do chop and drop because they're right there off the
Yeah.
path. You just chop them, toss them over into the garden, and they're right
I
there.
do a
I
lot of
love,
flowers and stuff too, like
mhm,
marigolds,
yeah.
calendula, nasturtiums.
And it's
They're
easy to
just
care
so
for them when they're
pretty.
right off the edge of a path too. So if you have to do any
Yeah.
deadheading or, cleaning up, it's right there, and it's really nice too. So I like having that. So now, now paths create a lot of edge, but you can actually make a path create more edge by making it curve and twist and turn,
True, yeah.
going to the same distance, and it looks as a nice appeal too. I I used to do more of that. Now it seems like more of my paths are just straight because I'm just the function. I'm trying to get it two things. I have a couple paths that are kind of meandering off around the pond, but then the rest of them are all straight. But you can, in an ideal design, maybe having the curved paths and create a lot more edge that way. And it's a great look
Yeah.
too. It just gives your
I
garden a really
love
nice
that look, and I do think if you're pushing, like, wheelbarrows and stuff, it definitely is a little
Mhm.
bit easier than turning a 45-degree angle.
True.
It's
Yeah.
easy. The smaller your yard is, the harder it is sometimes to do some of that, but I
Yeah.
love the curves.
I do too. I do too. You can have a combination of both. I
Mhm.
find around my 4x8 beds that's really difficult, and that's
Yeah.
why a lot of my yard is. So you're just running a lot of grid pattern pathways like that. But when I come off, like I said, in the more decorative areas, like around my fence, around my guilds, around my my pond, things like that, I'm definitely trying to make the paths have a little bit of a curve to them, and and give them that little, it's just some appeal and create more edge. It's more area. It's more area to plant flowers and herbs and all the things we're talking
Yeah.
about along, which is great. And food. I mean, you can absolutely plant food there as well. Um, you can have little mini raised beds and pots along the edges and plant all kinds of food along your pathways. I've done a lot of that. I always have planters and stuff sitting on the edge of the pathways, strawberries and planters and
Yeah.
just all kinds of things just growing along the edges. And I love doing that. And definitely your guilds, running your paths to your guilds and then around your guilds, it's going to do a couple things. Once, it just visual appeal is awesome, but two, it gives you some edge and it just makes the access to the guilds easier. And it's really nice if you into your guilds, if you can run little spurs off the pathway into the guilds. And I need to do more of that because what I do find is if you do a lot of guild building around your trees, it's actually hard to get in there to get to the fruit or to do pruning and things like
Yeah.
that. So you really need to kind of make the paths around them and then spurs into it that you're not planting anything in, so you can, actually access things
Yeah, I
better.
agree. I think we're gonna have to change some of what we've done already because some of our guilds we made too long, and so it's a long way
Mhm.
to walk all the way around to the other side. So
Yeah,
we
cut
need
more
to
paths through there.
put some paths in through there. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's something to think about because it makes it harder to access. And you
Mhm.
walk a lot further, and sometimes you get wore out and you don't want to walk all the time.
And one thing about just having great paths too that are easy to access. When you're like, what I notice is in my guilds and in my gardens is I just want to observe things. You need to constantly be looking. Do you have disease issues? Do you have insect issues? Are you able to get to it? Treat it. When you have nice pathways that just take you right by those things all the time, it's so much easier to see problems if you have a problem and be able to deal with it if you do have one. So just having those paths right there, it just makes it really nice also. So
Yeah,
get
and it
those
makes it
paths in all those
enjoyable.
places.
It makes it enjoyable when you have your morning coffee and you take your stroll through your garden.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that as one of the bonuses of having nice pathways here in a little bit. We'll kind of save that for later, but yeah, that absolutely, it's very
Yeah.
important to me for sure. I find that as it's almost as important to me as the food that it grows.
Yeah.
I need that. I need that. Paths can absolutely be soil builders and compost strips as well. Like you mentioned earlier, I heard you mention it, mulch breakdown areas. You're breaking down that mulch. worms are passing back and forth through them paths to the garden beds. They're taking that debris back, and and you're getting a lot of that into the garden beds right from the pathways. It's feeding the soil. If they're up against the beds, they're feeding that soil in the beds.
Yeah. I mean, in the
So,
moisture too, it's all in that same area.
yep, they're definitely contributing to the nutrients and everything, the organic matter in those beds. And just in the mycorrhizae, fungi, and all the things, it's contributing to all that. I mean, I got all kinds of mushrooms growing out there, toadstool type mushrooms growing out there in my paths right now, in those mulch paths. I was walking all over them earlier, just smashing them all to pieces. And I was moving some mulch around. Well, I was pulling, there were some weeds in the mulch too, and I was pulling those out. I pulled a dandelion out, and there was like 50 worms all right there in that mulch.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Once you
loaded
start,
with worms.
yeah, you start building that soil and you move it aside, and suddenly worms are just like right there all the time. It's great.
I seen one of the coolest things I seen in a video. It was years ago. I don't remember where I saw it, but this guy had pathways. Well, he had mulch pathways, but he had sections where he had built like some holes, and then he had basically supported the sides with some stone or something, and then he built like a little wooden lids, basically, that would snap down in, basically set right down in there and kind of into the pathway. And then basically he would pull that up and throw food scraps and stuff down in there, put it over for the worms, and it would feed, the worms would come and eat that on the pathway and take it into the beds. And I thought,
so kind of like a trench compost system, but not quite.
Yeah, but it was for vermicomposting. It was for the worms. It feed the worms,
right,
and they would take it into the beds basically right through there. And basically he just made these little pits and just removable. And I thought, that's just a great way to get the worm castings directly to the beds, and instead of having you in a whole separate system, you're right there at the garden doing it.
I would love to see that video. That's cool.
Yeah, and I've always thought I'd like to actually incorporate something like that. He was doing it, I think, in a really large greenhouse, but I don't see any reason why that wouldn't even work right out in a garden, to do something like that.
I love stuff like that. That it's much incorporates everything and less steps. I don't like when things get segmented into their own. I like incorporating it all into one big system.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I really think that's something I really think I might do one of these days, and try it out with a couple beds and just have a place to put it and let it just kind of, let the worms do the work for you. Again, you're letting nature kind of do your work for you, which I think is pretty awesome. And they're going to really feed that. I don't know. I'd probably start a little further away, just in case you end up with some smell or something, like further beds, because if they don't carry it away fast enough, you might get some odor or whatnot, but you could throw some organic matter on top of that and keep that down too, and let them just kind of work underneath that. For sure. Lay some cardboard over it or whatever, but yeah, it's a great place to let the worms and the bugs do the work for you in those areas. And just having it as chop and drop quarters, like I mentioned, I have comfrey along a lot of my paths. But just doing, say you have trees along those paths and other plants that you're constantly pruning, chop and drop, just constantly having those paths, walk right by there. You got your pruners with you. Things are sticking out. You're just constantly chopping and dropping, while you're just walking around your paths. And I think it's a great benefit to having paths right there as well. So you're building soil, building compost right in the beds, right from your pathways. And I think it's a good method.
Really. I think that's just the ideal method. And that's exactly what permaculture is about, is just that simplicity of being out there and doing it right there and dropping it right there where it was.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, next we'll talk about like water and erosion management. Paths can actually play a big part in that too. Your swales and your contour paths. I mean, a lot of people, if you dig really deep paths and fill them up with mulch, guess what? That's a water reservoir.
Very true.
Actually will hold water in the bed. Yeah. And so, I mean, you'll definitely have to put more mulch in them more often, because it's going to break down even faster and like that, but it works, I think
it would work really well somewhere where you don't have a lot of rain and you need that. That's perfect.
It will absolutely do that. And it will actually guide water too, because again, the water is going to flow down through that. So you can use it as like a channel. And especially if it's a sloped pathway to some degree, it'll actually run right down through that area. My beds are slightly higher. Even my in-ground beds are slightly higher than my pathway. So the water tends to just flow through the paths and then go all the way around the beds, water the beds into from the sides all the way around, which works out really, really great. So again, you got this moisture reservoir flowing around
Yeah,
the
I could see
bed.
where that would work really well here because we don't have much
Mhm.
flat, so it would direct where you want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and also I think, say you're in a city environment and you're watering, you could actually have to where your water would say spill out of, say you're collecting water, but maybe you can't collect enough and you're going to water. Maybe you even have like a hose set up to where you can just have it run into the pathways, saturate the pathways. It's going to actually do a lot of filtering before it even gets into your beds. You can even think that in
Right.
that kind of a mindset, filter that water a little bit before it makes it to the actual, your good soil,
Yeah,
just
that's a great idea. Yeah.
let the gravel, or if you have a gravel pathway, it can work the same way, or mulch, and it could do a lot of filtering for you. But yeah, it can absolutely play a huge part in just water management on your property.
Well, I
Um,
know for us with our trees, when we planted them, we were hand watering forever. Remember, if
I
anybody's listened
do.
long enough, they remember that saga. 3 years of hand watering, and when we put mulch on, it was a drastic difference. I don't know why I didn't think of it to begin with.
Mhm.
And I could see that being good too if you had a remote place or somewhere you couldn't visit every day to check on things, or maybe you could only go once a week. You could almost
Yeah.
create like that water battery, that
Yep.
bank water there for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've seen people do it in like on large scale, really deep trenches. I seen a video, and I think I even talked to you about it one time before. And this lady done it like probably 3 feet deep pathways. I mean, they trenched between these beds. I mean, it was
That
a
is
permaculture
huge.
designed
3 feet.
garden. It was like islands out here. She didn't really do like square beds or anything. It was almost like it was like a permaculture, like
I
curved
remember
path
you telling me
deal.
this.
And
Yeah.
she went like 3 feet, 3.5 feet deep, filled it completely with wood chips.
Wow.
And
That's a lot of wood
because they
chips.
were having these major drought where they were at, and they brought in all these wood chips and just filled these things completely with wood chips. And then it completely never had a drought issue again in her gardens. No matter how little
That is
rain they got,
amazing.
it would fill up and hold and water those beds. And I
Yeah, so
thought
I
that's
could see this working really well, like somewhere out west where somebody
mhm,
has a lot more arid than what we have. I mean, we are blessed with rain, even though we complained about our droughts, it's nothing compared to what they get out there. I mean, I could see that
yeah,
working so well out there.
yeah, absolutely. Places with a lot less rainfall. Yeah, we don't have that
Hmm.
issue usually. We have
Yeah,
had some droughts the last couple of years, but
yeah,
nothing to that extreme for sure. Even, but yeah, absolutely, a path could function that way for you. Well, let's talk about the aesthetics and the experience.
yeah.
I
That's my
I'm gonna
favorite
tell
part.
you, my garden is about food. It really is, but I would say it's almost equally as about
Hmm.
just enjoyment and just having
Yeah.
that experience. I mean, I like to have many hours a week where I can just look at my garden and walk through my
Hmm.
garden and enjoy my garden. It's why I plant flowers that I'll never eat. They're not even edible, and it's fine because
Yep.
I like to look at them. And but yeah, I think it's important. It's not important to everybody. Some people are just it's all function. And if that's you, that's great. But for some of us, I love the experience of my garden. I just
Oh
love to grab a cup
man.
of coffee and take a stroll through it or sit out on a bench. I've got a couple benches out there. I'll sit and read a book out there or something. That's important to me. That
Yeah. That is too for me. And to hear like for me, there's so many birds and stuff. So you hear the birds and the insects and you see the bees
yes.
there. And I just love sitting there and watching all that wildlife and hearing the birds chirp and be excited and
Mhm.
find worms. And
Yeah.
um, to me, it just really makes me happy and it helps. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't even explain it. I just don't
And
have words for
and
it,
pa
but
and
it just
pathways
is
play an
nice.
important part in that. If you're gonna have an inviting garden, a beautiful inviting garden, a pathway that takes you to those locations is really important. Winding, well maintained. If all I see is like weeds in it, it's gonna stress me out. That's not relaxing. I want one that's cared for, easy to care for, and that's got all the stuff on the sides and everything that I want. I want a well maintained pathway, to where it serves that function, and it's inviting and it helps you enjoy the garden. And it just has a flow to it. And I like spots. Like I might have a big log sitting here that I can sit on, or a bench over here that I can hang about,
Right.
or I have the little bridge and a pond that I can just kind of lean on that and look at things or whatever. I like having that kind of stuff in my garden, to where you can just have just reflective spaces. I won't go
Yeah,
as far as call them sacred,
I
but
can't wait to
reflective
build some of
for
that
sure.
into it. We had a bird bath in ours, but that was kind of about it because it was pretty small. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love
And
the idea of like the benches in there and a spot
yeah,
to sit and read, or eat. And if you have kids or grandkids, a spot for them to like have a little bean teepee or a sunflower
yeah,
teepee. I love that.
yeah. I think that's really cool. And I also think to have certain scents, the smell of the certain areas too.
Yeah,
Like I
that
have
would
an
be
area that has I have an area that's pretty strong mint, and then I have an area that's pretty strong garlic, and then you have and then different trees put off different smells, and so that's kind of cool too. This aromatic herbs and things like that in certain areas as you're flowing through your garden. I mean, it's just like I said, I don't want to get too woo woo into it or anything, but it's just enjoyable. It just helps you
yeah.
relax, right? It's just an enjoyable experience. Now you can get, for people like you that like to run around barefoot all the time, having that sensory paths too. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of people that's really
Yeah,
important to them. So having moss and smooth stones and some grassy areas,
right.
or where you can actually just enjoy that and walk around. I have gravel and mulch that'll probably put splinters in your feet in my garden, so it probably wouldn't be as enjoyable at my place. But if you have some paths that
Right.
are enjoyable like that, for certain people, that's really important to be able to walk around like that
Well,
and
and
just
I
feel
can
that.
see if you're trying to bring your kids into gardening with you, if you create that space where paths go to fun little places and they're able to participate in the gardening experience, I think they're going to be more likely to want to help you pick peas and do some weeding and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, and I can see, like, especially if the paths are rounded, kids really enjoying that, creating some
Yeah.
rounded spaces for them to run and play around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm even considering I have a mulberry tree that I'm not cutting down. I cut it down a little bit, but I'm actually letting it kind of get a little bulkier because I'm actually thinking about putting a small tree house up in that where it's at.
Oh,
My
fun.
grandkids would love that. They just love to be able to run out there and jump
Yeah.
up in that and overlook the garden. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, and you can put a
Um,
path to that and make it
yeah,
just this
a little
magical,
staircase,
fun.
almost like a one of them hobbit hole doors on it or something. Just make something really cool for them
Right.
to
And a
kind of
little
like fun.
archway and
There
yeah,
you
it could be
go.
really fun.
All kinds of cool stuff you can do. But yeah, I think that's important. And so just enjoy. It's just going to make a space where you can really enjoy your garden. I think is really important. Pathways are very, very important for that. Now we talked a little bit about accessibility, just the function of a path, but having it to where it kind of serves all the function. We talk about the width, having it firmed where you can run wheelbarrows and carts, and you- just be able to get
Right.
mobile around it, but also using materials different times of the year that aren't slippery when they're wet or get icy. I busted my tail this week because I have a wood section where you step off my back deck. I have a little bit of an area there where I have some actual wood boards down, like on the pathway. It's almost like a little deck that extends out on the pathway. Well, it's really shaded.
Oh no.
And
Yeah.
so it got like slimy. You know how it'll do when the
Yeah,
sun
I
isn't
know what
on
you're
and it gets
saying.
wet,
Yep.
slimy. I stepped on that and it was like stepping on black ice. I went down so hard and fast. It
Oh
hurt.
no.
I hit so hard it popped the lens out of my glasses. I had to get
Oh
my
my
glasses
word.
fixed.
I'm glad you're okay. Wow.
I smacked the deck. I went down hard. And it made me think of that. It's like, yeah, you want to have areas that aren't going to get like that, right? So I need to
Right.
change that area because it's in a
Yeah, I
shady
think that's
spot.
important to
Yeah,
think
you
about.
can. Yeah, so it made me think about that for the notes. I was like, I got to put that in there because you got to pay attention to that.
Well,
Cement
and
will
I'm
get
also
icy,
starting to think about, like, as I age, am I making these paths wide enough that I'm going to be able to get to them? You're not as nimble. You can't
Yeah,
get into all these little tiny places
yeah.
anymore. So, yeah.
And we were talking about the height earlier. If you're building up and around you, and you can build layers to where you can reach things without bending down so much too. That's really cool too. You can get things raised up on pedestals or containers or
Right.
whatever, and get them up where you can actually tend to things at the right heights and stuff. So paths are great for that. Yeah, but just some things to consider on seasonal considerations too. Ice and wet and shady
Yes.
areas and things like that. It might make a difference. But
Yeah.
one of the really important things about paths also is wildlife and biodiversity. I love having a habitat friendly edge, native flowers, grasses, shrubs, all these things. You got a lot of birds, and if you have pollinators, you have a little pollinator habitats. Uh, not having barriers to where like things like frogs and good
Right.
insects and
Yeah.
things can get over. It'd be easy to create something that's too hard for them to actually be in there. Um, and just lots of nectar producing flowers for lots of bees and things and amphibians. We have I have two little ponds. I have the bigger, larger pond in the backyard, but then I have a small one on the side right off the path. And it's just a place for frogs, toads, just having little, amphibians and things, little shelters you can put in for them to have them on the property. Cause all that stuff really, it really benefits. Um,
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
it
I have a
adds to
lot of
my enjoyment too when I go out there and I'm like, "Oh, the frog's out here today," because
yeah,
we
I
had
have a
a
lot.
we had a resident
Even though I
toad
live in
for a long
town,
time.
I have a lot of wildlife that I don't want. When we get a lot of squirrels, we get a lot
Right.
of raccoons, we get a lot of possums. But you're going to get that if you have a wildlife friendly backyard, you're going to invite it all. But yeah, I enjoy some of that. I just don't like it when they start tearing up my house or killing my quail or something like
Yes.
that. That's when you start running into
Yes.
problems. But yeah, I like having some of that too. But yeah, just having if you're planting it correctly, and it's easy to make a wildlife friendly area for those things. So having nice pathways for that. Maintenance and longevity, again, it's why I like the
Mhm.
gravel and why I like the mulch. I mean, maintenance
Yeah.
on the gravel is low, except for when it starts getting weeds in it, then it gets hard, but you don't have to, add any more to it. The mulch does better with the weeds, but you have to add more to it.
Well,
If
and
you
the
actually had like,
rocks sorry, I
go ahead.
interrupted you
No,
totally.
no, go ahead.
The rocks for us have been easier to blow leaves,
Yeah.
where the mulch blows when you blow the leaves. So, yeah.
And I think if you had the rocks, if you didn't put any landscape fabric under them and you had them deep enough, if you did get weed seeds and weeds start growing, you just pull them out so easy. It's just they get down
Yeah.
there and root into that landscape fabric that I got under mine, makes it hard to pull them. But if I didn't have
Yeah.
that, they pull out real easy. So I like low input pathways. Again, you know, uh, I think I think what we were talking about earlier with if you take um, pavers and make them ground level and mow over the top of them, that's actually pretty low maintenance, really,
Yeah,
to
if
do
you could
that.
do that, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think they
so you
are.
have to dig out a little bit and put them down on the ground, but it actually does
And
make
I
a
like
really nice
that
low
look with,
maintenance.
like, the green between
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
colors and stuff. I really like that look. Yeah.
yeah. I did that out in the front, like on our parking strip, because we park on the road out there, and I actually made it to where we step on those, and I actually sunk it down into the dirt, and it actually works really well. I just mow right over the top of them, and we don't turn it
That's
to
cool.
mud going to our car back and forth so much, going out
Right.
to our cars, which I like. So, and you might have to reshape your pathways to make them better or change the material, if it's not meeting your needs. You might figure out that some are higher traffic and really you should probably have a different material there. Some are lower traffic and you could probably just go more natural there. Again, permaculture is a lot about observing and changing and adapting as you need
Right.
to. So it's fine to do that. Um,
Well,
yeah.
and
So
one
I
of the
think,
things I thought about too is with the rocks, it definitely retains some of the heat, which is helpful sometimes, depending
yeah,
on what you're trying to grow there.
yeah, sure can.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. It can produce or store a lot of that have that battery, basically a heat sink, where it just stores that heat and then puts it off at night. So if you, especially in a climate like mildly mine, but more even important in a climate like
yeah, it
yours,
becomes a
where it's
little
a
bit
whole lot more.
important here sometimes,
Yeah,
yeah.
it could definitely be an important part of it. And we've talked about it, just having food production. I mean, we're talking about a lot of the herbs and things, but you could actually just grow berries and greens and edible flowers and all kinds of stuff along your paths. You can definitely grow the things that are producing nitrogen and soil fertility. Definitely provide the worms. Definitely provide the fungi and things like that. The fungal activity. Paths can just serve so many ways like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the bush varieties of things would look super nice, right alongside your bush beans, your smaller varieties of your squashes. Those just look super cool too along
Mhm.
the edges of these and they make
Yeah.
it so you can reach in
If you've got
super easy.
blueberries and blackberries and raspberries and all this stuff along, and even some strawberries and some pots along the edges, that is so great. Kids are going to just love walking down those paths and
Yeah.
just going to the candy store. I mean, pretty much. It's just it's a great experience. You want to get your kids to love gardening, create a pathway with all that, those kind of goodies along it, where they can just tear into them and they just love it, and it'll just be a great experience for them being out in the garden. Something maybe that might be important to some people and some people it may not be is, we'll call it symbolism and storytelling, and that's paths as narratives, especially if you're doing things like farm tours or homestead tours. Maybe
Oh
it's part
yeah.
of your business or it's just part of your experience of your homestead. Being able to take people through your garden and tell stories as you go and have a path that does that. Different things, almost like different chapters, berries, herbs, vegetables, guilds, have these almost like chapters, breaking it down into like a story, almost walking through your garden. I think that would make a great experience for homestead
Yeah, it would.
tours.
I was trying to
Yeah.
when I saw that you wrote that, I was trying to think how that would work, but I think it would be make it
Yeah.
really fun.
And if you're doing tours, and it could be a teaching tool, your pathways could be a great place to have your markers and your signs of different things. Maybe you want to teach people what these are and you want a sign there saying what this is, or plant names, or if you got a pond area, you could have maybe a list of things that are in that area, different things you're providing. I mean, just it could be just a learning experience walking through your pathways of your garden. And to some people, that's not going to be important at all. It's just your homestead is
Right.
your homestead, and it's not a thing. But for some people that are, especially in permaculture, if you're wanting to teach people permaculture or expand that knowledge, it's a great way to do it. Just to take people through your homestead, and that could be fun. That could be a lot of fun to just walk people through there and tell them the story and how things work together from your pathways. So I
Yeah,
think
that could be really cool. I could see you doing
yeah.
Yeah, you could do a lot of ideas. And my mind started going when you said that. I mean, you could do so many
Yeah,
different
I mean,
ideas with that.
like I started doing that years ago. Like we had the pathway that went over the bridge and around the curve, and we had the different things along the edge and around the back of the greenhouse. And even on a small property, you could take a tour through the property and tell about everything that you're doing, and it was visually appealing, and
Right.
it just made it
Yeah.
easy to do. So yeah, it's a
I
fun
like
thing.
that a lot.
I think it's something I wanted to include because I think to some people that could be important. I think that could be a neat part of your homestead, your permaculture homestead, if it's something you wanted to include. And a lot of people are doing that these days. A lot of people are even making money just doing homestead tours. I mean, it's just something. It's even an income provider for their homestead for some folks.
Interesting.
So be a cool way
Very
to
cool.
go about it, using your
It would be
paths to
really
tell
cool.
stories.
Yeah. Well,
But just
especially from the teaching aspect too, it'd just be
yeah.
really, really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I think that's, I think we kind of covered the gamut there on pathways, but as you can see, a pathway is certainly more than just a way to get from point A to point B. It can be a provider of your homestead. It can be a contributor to your homestead. It can do so much for your homestead, and it can just be enjoyable. So paths are really important. If you don't put in paths, I think you're missing a really important element of your homestead that could really bring a lot to what you have by putting in some nice pathways and creating that edge and abundance along them. So I hope we give some folks some things to consider, and think about,
Yeah.
okay, what kind of pathways do I need to be putting in to just up my game on the homestead here as far as the experience, and what I'm growing and what I'm doing. I think it's pretty cool. I couldn't imagine my homestead without some pathways. Just if I'm just walking across the yard to get to where I'm going, it would not be the same as having these nice defined pathways. It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I love the curved pathways and the little bridges and stuff like that. And I think when we do stuff like that to make our homesteads look visually appealing, we also get other people interested in becoming homesteaders. And isn't that kind
Yeah.
of our goal?
Yeah. Ultimately, and like I've mentioned a couple times, it's just as important to me. I think it's just as important to my health to have a place that I can just go out and relax in and
Yeah.
wander through and just
It's
enjoy.
so relaxing and
It's
enjoyable.
just as important to my health as the food that I'm growing. And I want that. I
Yep.
want that experience. So, like I said, some people, they're just fine with the function. I'm just here to grow food. I just want this to to produce, and that's great for you. That's great. I need the other as well. I need the visual experience, I need the birds and the frogs and I need to
Yeah,
see
and the walking
everything happening.
pathways where
Yeah,
you walk and you pick a bean and then you pick a
the
blueberry.
smell of
Yeah.
the herbs, the visual effect of the flowers. I need all that. I need all of that on my homestead
Yeah,
because
me
that's
too.
it's part of the experience for me that makes it worth it, makes it fun, and just makes it worth doing. If it was just growing food, I could go to Farmer Joe down the street and buy good healthy food. I want
Yeah.
the experience as well,
Yep.
So
It's
anyway,
healthy.
that's all I have. You have anything else you want to throw in there?
I don't. I think we talked about it a lot, and I think that yeah, I think people need to try it. Try different methods.
Yeah.
Different methods are going to work different wherever you're at too. I mean, there's rocks probably definitely work really good in the out west, and other places they might want to do a living like where we're at, where we get more rain with some
Mhm.
living paths work a little bit easier because it's not, we don't have to worry so much about water.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Think differently about your past. Think differently about everything. Think about all the functions, about everything on your homestead. Don't just be limited to the main purpose of something. Take everything you do, every fence you put in, every pathway you put in, every tree you grow, every animal you raise, and just think about all the different ways that they can serve, those elements can serve your homestead, and just not
Yeah,
limit yourself
and
to
that's
one
so
thing.
much what permaculture is about,
Yeah.
is function stacking, those
Yep.
multi-purpose things. It's not just because we're trying to do the most with the space we have. We are, but it's also
Yeah.
just because it just makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes life easier,
Yep.
and in this instance, for you and I at least, it increases our enjoyment greatly. So
Yeah, absolutely. I probably wouldn't if it was just about food production. I don't know. I'd probably burn out. I'd probably burn out and end up just
yeah,
buying healthy food from somebody else, honestly. I have to
yeah,
enjoy
same
it.
here,
Yeah.
same here.
So,
Because it's yeah, same here. We could talk about
well,
that for a
folks,
while.
I guess that's what we'll end it there. Until next week, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.